We now begin to talk about the different chemical cycles, and we start with the water cycle. You're probably most familiar with the water cycle, so this video shouldn't be too hard. We know that water is essential to all living things, but it's also a limited resource, so organisms depend on the water cycle to constantly renew water and maintain its usability. There are 5 different terms that you should know that describe different processes in the water cycle, and they are precipitation, infiltration, evaporation, transpiration, and condensation. Most of them should sound pretty familiar, and let's put them in the context of this cycle. So we begin with precipitation, rain, snow, or hail that falls to the earth. Some of it runs off into bodies of water, and some of it seeps into the soil. So the water that flows off the land is aptly called runoff. The process of the soil absorbing the water here is called infiltration. As the water trickles through the soil, it can be used by plants and other soil organisms. But eventually, it hits a water table, which is a reservoir of water below the soil and the rock. So this is actually where most cities and towns get their water supply. If you've ever traced your city's water supply, you'll probably find that it is drawn out of the ground through pumps and wells. So for example, you'd have a well drill here that taps into this table, this water table, and then it draws water out for drinking. So the water in this water table is really clean too, because as the water infiltrates through the soil acts as a type of filter to clean out the water. Anyway, once the water is in the water table, it can also find its way to bodies of water, so it can sort of seep back into a body of water. And once all the water is settled into this body of water, it evaporates into the air. So the water rises into the air as a gas. So there's evaporation and transpiration is a fancy word for evaporation from plants and other living organisms. So when you're sweating and then the water evaporates from your skin, that's also considered transpiration. In the air, the water molecules cool off and undergo condensation, and that's when clouds form. So this is water condensed into half gas, half liquid, and that's when you see beautiful clouds in the sky. And once the clouds form, they again begin to precipitate, and that continues the cycle once again. So don't think that the water cycle is powered by itself. The sun puts in a great deal of energy to evaporate water and perpetuate this cycle. Each of the different places water spends time in is called a reservoir, and the ocean, the atmosphere, fresh bodies of water, and groundwater are all water's reservoirs. So this is a water reservoir, this is a water reservoir, this is a water reservoir, and the clouds in the air are all water reservoirs. So here's a key point to remember. Water doesn't spend an equal amount of time in each of these reservoirs. For example, a water molecule could spend hundreds of years cycling through the ocean, but only a few days chilling as a cloud in the atmosphere. Each of the different reservoirs don't hold the same amount of water either. So an ocean obviously holds a lot more water than the atmosphere. In fact, 97% of the water found on the Earth is in the ocean. Found in the biosphere, I should say, is in the ocean. And 2% hang out in the glaciers and polar ice caps. And the last 1% is found in lakes and rivers like this one. The water in the atmosphere is so small that it's basically negligible, so it doesn't even count for a substantial percentage of the water in the biosphere. And as you can see, water spends most of its time in its liquid form, and that's the primary form in which it is used by organisms. So let's apply a little bit of what we've learned about water in this video to some current day problems that we face in modern society, which is the pollution of water. So water the water that we use today is the same water that dinosaurs bathed in thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And if you think about it, the water that we use today will be the water that thousands of people will be using in another thousands of years. And so if we pollute the water today, that can cause trouble for water usability and water availability for people in the future.